The research facility orbited a failed star-brown dwarf whose gravitational anomalies provided natural camouflage. Dax guided the Fortune through gaps in the security grid, his hands moving across the controls with unusual precision. "I can feel you helping me," he murmured. "It's like having extra senses." "The alignment allows a certain blending of perception," Neri confirmed. "Your instincts guide my awareness. My processing enhances your reactions." They docked at an emergency maintenance port, bypassing the main security checkpoints. As Dax prepared to board the facility, Neri expanded her form to envelop him, partially not restricting his movement but creating a subtle field around him. "They'll have quantum detection barriers," she explained. "This will help us pass undetected." Moving through the facility was like navigating a nightmare. Corridors shifted subtly when not directly observed. Security systems operated on principles that defied conventional physics. Twice, they nearly encountered patrol units. But each time, Neri adjusted their probability signature, making them temporarily less likely to be noticed. They found Tehran in the central research chamber, a crystalline entity similar to Neri, but larger, its internal light pulsing erratically within a containment field, bristling with suppression technologies. "It's in pain," Dax whispered. "Not pain as you understand it," Neri replied. "But yes. Its pattern is being systematically fragmented. For study." Dax approached the control panel. "How do we shut this down?" "We don't." Neri expanded her form, extending tendrils of crystalline light toward the containment field. "I need to establish connection directly." As her energy field touched the barrier, alarms blared throughout the facility. Dax frantically worked too. Override the security systems. They were responding to something beyond his understanding, the resonance between Neri and Tehran. Two quantum entities recognizing each other across artificially imposed boundaries. The containment field flickered. Tehran's erratic pulsing steadied, synchronizing with Neri's rhythm. Then both began to glow brighter, their crystalline structures vibrating at frequencies that made the very air shimmer. "Neri," Dax called, suddenly anxious. "What's happening?" "Integration," she answered, her mental voice strangely doubled. Remembering together, the chamber door slammed shut as facility security protocols engaged. Through the observation window, Dax could see armed hegemony personnel converging on their position, minutes at most, before they breached the room. Inside, the containment field, Tehran and Neri were merging, not physically combining, but creating overlapping patterns of light and crystalline structure. Sharing something beyond conventional communication, Dax felt a strange emptiness as his connection. With Neri faded, replaced by her deepening bond with Tehran, he turned his attention to the security controls, determined to buy them time even as an unexpected hollowness grew within him. Suddenly, the entire facility shuddered. Power fluctuated. Gravity wavered. Behind him, the containment field shattered, not violently but dissolving like mist before. Sunlight. Where Neri and Tehran had been, a new entity hovered larger, more complex, pulsing with harmonies of light that seemed to exist partially outside normal perception. "Neri," Dax whispered. The entity turned toward him. "Yes and no," it replied, its mental voice resonant with multiple harmonics. "We are ... more now. But I remember you, Dax Mercer." The facility trembled again, more violently. Warning klaxons screamed through the corridors. "The integration has destabilized the quantum suppression grid," the entity explained. "This entire structure will soon lose coherence with normal spacetime." "You mean it's going to explode?" "More accurately, it will forget how to exist." Dax backed toward the door. "And we should probably leave." "Yes." The entity drifted closer. But first, a choice. Outside, the pounding on the chamber door intensified. Security overrides were being attempted. They had minutes, perhaps less. "I can return to my previous form," the entity said. "Separate Neri's pattern from what we've become, remain as I am more complete, more powerful, but ... different." Understanding dawned on Dax. "You're asking what I want. Your pattern has become significant to Neri's." "Yes." Dax studied the beautiful, complex being before him, so much more than the simple crystalline sphere he'd first encountered, yet containing echoes of the Neri he'd come to know. The Neri who had gradually revealed her true nature to him, who had connected with him in ways no human ever had. "What do you want?" he asked. The entity pulsed thoughtfully. "Both potentialities have value. It's together. We remember more of what we were before the hegemony. Separate, Neri retains her unique resonance with you." The facility shook again. Structural integrity warnings flashed across control panels. "Whatever you decide," Dax said finally, "it needs to be your choice, not mine." The entity brightened, light patterns swirling more intensely. An unexpected answer. "Most humans attempt to preserve what they know. I'm not most humans. And you're not what anyone expected you to be." For a moment, the chamber filled with light so complex it seemed to fold into dimensions Dax couldn't perceive. When his vision cleared, Neri hovered before him, her familiar, crystalline form, but now containing intricate new patterns of light, memories of her brief union with Tehran. "You chose to separate," Dax observed. "I chose to remain who I am," she corrected, "while keeping what I learned." The chamber door began to glow red as cutting tools attacked from the other side. "We need to go," Dax urged. "Yes," Neri expanded slightly, enveloping him in her field again. "Hold on to your mind. This will feel ... unusual." What happened next defied Dax's ability to process. They didn't move through space so much as probability itself folded around them. One moment they were in the research chamber. The next, they were aboard the Fortune. Through the viewports, Dax watched as the facility rippled like a reflection in disturbed water, then simply untethered from reality. "Did you just teleport us?" he gasped. "No, I adjusted our likelihood of being here rather than there." The Fortune's engines engaged automatically, pulling them away from the destabilizing facility. Behind them, the structure didn't explode so much as unravel, dissolving into patterns of energy that briefly formed structures of breathtaking complexity before fading. "Torin," Dax asked. Free Neri answered, "Existing now as pure pattern rather than contained form, beyond the hegemony's reach." As they accelerated to safe distance, Dax felt Neri's field still partially surrounding him, maintaining their connection. Her light pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. "What now?" he asked quietly. "There are others," she replied. "Not many, but enough. Scattered throughout hegemony space, waiting to remember what they are. A rescue mission. That's going to make us pretty unpopular." "Yes," her form brightened with what he now recognized as amusement. "Does that concern you?" Dax smiled, reaching out to let his fingers pass through her crystalline surface. Feeling that remarkable connection between them strengthened once more. "Not particularly," he said. "I've always had questionable taste in friends." "Is that what—" "We are friends?" He considered the strange bond between them not quite human intimacy, not quite alien symbiosis, but something new and undefined. "I think we're something else," he said finally. "Something without a name yet." Neri drifted closer, her light patterns forming complex harmonies that resonated with something deep within him. "And we'll discover what that is," she said, "together." The Fortune accelerated into the darkness between stars, carrying them toward. Uncertainties that, for the first time in Dax's life, felt more like promises than threats. The first time I met Commander Nyala Voss, I accidentally saluted a cleaning drone and dropped a stack of quantum-encrypted cargo manifests all over the deck. To be fair, the drone had more personality than most of my previous supervisors, and I was running on 36 hours without sleep. "This is the new hire?" Commander Voss's voice resonated with a slight harmonic undertone that all Australia possessed, like two voices speaking in perfect synchronization. I scrambled to collect the scattered tablets while desperately trying to appear competent. "It wasn't going well, yes, Commander." Asa Hayes, Xenolinguistic Specialist reporting for duty. I finally managed to stand upright. Though my collection of manifests now resembled a poorly shuffled deck of cards, Commander Voss towered over me, her skin shimmering with a faint blue luminescence that all Australia exhibited under standard station lighting. The geometric patterns across her face, natural markings that denoted clan and lineage, pulsed softly as she studied me. Her eyes were deep violet, with vertical pupils that narrowed as she leaned closer. "You are not qualified for this position," she stated flatly. I swallowed hard. "With all due respect, Commander, I passed the Meridian Stellar Freight entrance exams." "Barely," she replied, taking the stack of manifests from my hands and reorganizing them with effortless precision. "Your understanding of quantum freight protocols is... ... She paused, searching for a diplomatic word. ... Inadequate. She wasn't wrong. I'd stretched the truth on my application to Meridian. It's not about my credentials in xenolinguistics. Sci was. Fluent in 17 alien languages and could parse another dozen with the help of translation software. But I'd claimed proficiency in interstellar shipping regulations, when in reality, it could barely navigate the Earth Postal Service without anxiety. "I'm a quick learner," I offered. Commander Voss's markings flickered in a pattern I couldn't interpret. "You will report to Docking Bay Epsilon. Night shift. Starting immediately." "Night shift? But I just arrived on station. Is that a problem, Specialist Hayes?" Her tone made it clear there was only one acceptable answer. "No, Commander. Epsilon. Night shift. Got it." She nodded once and turned away, her movements unnaturally fluid, as though gravity affected her differently. As she walked, I noticed a slight asymmetry in her gait, barely perceptible limp. Unusual for Australi, who were known for their physical perfection. 6 hours later, reported to Docking Bay Epsilon wearing the standard Meridian jumpsuit, which made me look like I'd been vacuum sealed inside a navy blue trash bag. The docking bay was quiet, with only the ambient hum of environmental systems and the occasional ping of monitoring equipment breaking the silence. Commander Voss sat at the central console, her long, slender fingers moving across the holographic interface with hypnotic precision. She didn't look up when I entered. "Sit," she said, indicating a workstation beside her own. "No greeting? Just a command wrapped in that haunting, dual-toned voice." I sat. A stack of tablets immediately materialized before me, projected from the console. "Process these. Flag any discrepancies in the Ursuline syllabic code." Their translators often mistake cargo designations for poetry, which results in, she paused, ... problems. "What kind of problems?" I asked. "Last month, a colony received 300 units of industrial waste instead of medical supplies. They composed quite a moving elegy about it." I couldn't tell if she was joking. Her face remained impassive, those violet eyes revealing nothing. For the next 7 hours, we worked in near silence. I decoded Ursuline's shipping manifests, puzzling through their circular script with its embedded emotional indicators. Commander Voss occasionally slid new work my way, but otherwise seemed content to ignore my existence as my shift neared its end. I began organizing my station for departure. "You're not finished," Commander Voss said without looking up. "My shift ends in 10 minutes, I replied, checking the station chronometer. "These manifests must be processed before the Ursuline freighter docks at 0600, but that's 2 hours from now." "Yes." She still didn't look at me. I sighed and pulled the remaining tablets back toward me. "Is there a reason these weren't distributed throughout the day shift?" For the first time that night, Commander Voss turned her full attention to me. Her markings pulsed, rapidly a sign of agitation, or possibly surprise. "Day shift personnel are not qualified to process Ursuline syntax." "Neither am I," I muttered, but resumed working anyway. 2 hours stretched into 3. The Ursuline freighter docked, offloaded, and departed. Still, Commander Voss found more tasks for me. Review translation. Protocols. Analyze communication patterns from the outer rim. Cross-reference cultural references in the Cygnus. Sector trade agreements. None of it seemed urgent. None of it even seemed particularly important. At 0930, 3.5 hours past the end of my shift, I finally stood up. "Commander, I need sleep if I'm going to be any use tonight." She looked at me for a long moment, her markings cycling through a series of patterns too rapid for me to follow. "Very well," she said finally. "You are dismissed." As I turned to leave, I noticed something odd. Despite all the work she'd created to keep me there, Commander Voss made no move to leave herself. She simply returned to her console, fingers dancing. Across the interface, alone in the vast empty docking bay. The next night was the same. And the next. It's always more work than could possibly fit in a standard shift. It's always a reason to stay late. Always Commander Voss, remaining behind when I finally left. It took me a week to realize she never left at all. 3 weeks into my night shifts at Docking Bay Epsilon, I began to notice a pattern. The later the hours stretched, the more Commander Voss's rigid demeanor softened, not dramatically, but enough that I could sense the difference. Her instructions became less clipped, her pauses between sentences lengthened, and occasionally her markings would pulse with a warm amber glow when I correctly interpreted a particularly difficult Ursulon phrase. Tonight, I arrived with a piece, offering 2 containers of synthesized coffee from the station's commissary. The beverage wasn't particularly good, but it contained enough caffeine to resurrect the dead. "What is this?" Commander Voss asked as I placed 1 container on her console. "Coffee, a human tradition for the chronically sleep-deprived and professionally overworked." She studied the container with scientific curiosity. "Your species relies on chemical stimulants to function during designated rest periods?" "Pretty much," I confirmed, taking a long sip from my own container. "Also, it's a social thing. Sharing drinks, building camaraderie, that sort of human nonsense." Her markings flickered briefly amusement, perhaps. She lifted the container carefully and took a tentative sip. Her pupils dilated immediately, and she set the container down with deliberate precision. "This is aggressive," she said after a moment. I laughed. "That's a fair assessment." She didn't smile. Never seen her smile, but her markings glowed. A softer blue as she took another, more cautious sip. The night proceeded with its usual routine of manifest processing and translation. Verification until an alert chimed from the central system. "Unscheduled arrival," Commander Voss announced, instantly alert. "Telemetry indicates a Solon trading vessel with damaged navigation systems. Should we alert station security?" I asked, already reaching for the emergency protocols I'd memorized. "Not yet." She moved to the communications array. "Solon vessels are notoriously private. They may perceive security as hostile." I watched as she opened a channel, her voice shifting to accommodate the complex tonal language of the Solons. I recognized fragments, formal greetings, offers of assistance, but the dialect was obscure, even for my linguistic database. The response came through distorted and frantic. I couldn't decipher the words, but the panic was universal. "Primary oxygen recyclers are failing," Commander Voss translated. "Auxiliary systems compromised. Estimated functional atmosphere. 17 minutes. My heart raced. "That's not enough time for a full emergency response team." "No," she agreed, already moving toward the equipment lockers. "It is not." She extracted 2 emergency EVA suits and tossed one my way. "Can you operate in vacuum conditions, Specialist Hayes?" "Theoretically," I replied, catching the suit. "I passed the simulator training. Theory becomes practice today." Her voice remained calm, but her markings pulsed rapidly. "We must stabilize their atmospheric systems before docking can complete." 5 minutes later, we stood in the airlock. As the computer counted down to depressurization, Commander Voss checked my suit seals personally, her fingers moving with practiced efficiency. "Stay behind me," she instructed. "Follow my lead. Do not improvise." The outer doors opened and we pushed off into the void. The Solon vessel hung before us, a sleek, crystalline structure now marred by scorch marks along its propulsion array. A narrow docking tube extended from our station, attempting to establish a secure connection despite the vessel's unstable. Orientation Commander Voss moved through vacuum with extraordinary grace, using precise bursts from her suit thrusters to navigate the irregular gravitational field between the station and the damaged ship. I followed less elegantly, overcompensating and tumbling briefly before regaining control. We reached the manual override for the Solon airlock. Commander Voss extracted a universal interface device from her utility belt and began bypassing the ship's security protocols. "Your systems are degrading rapidly," she said over our private channel. "Oxygen levels critical." Airlock finally yielded, and we entered the ship's main corridor. Even through my suit sensors, I could detect the thinning atmosphere. Warning lights pulsed along the walls, bathing the crystalline interior in ominous red. 3 Solons huddled near the environmental control center, tall, willowy beings with translucent skin that revealed the complex circulatory systems beneath. They looked up as we entered, their multifaceted eyes reflecting our helmet lights. Commander. Voss moved immediately to the control panel, her fingers working with impossible speed across the alien interface. I knelt beside the Solons, activating my suit's external speaker. "We're here to help," I said, using the basic Solon phrases I knew. "Breathe slowly. Conserve oxygen." One of them reached out, touching my visor with trembling fingers. They spoke, their voice barely audible in the thinning air. "They say the ship was attacked," I translated for Commander Voss. "Targeted specifically. Not an accident." Her hands paused briefly over the controls. "Ask who attacked them." I relayed the question, but the Solon's response was interrupted by a violent shudder that ran through the ship. "Atmospheric stabilizers online," Commander Voss announced. "But structural integrity is compromised. We need to evacuate now." Guided the weakened Solons through the airlock and back toward the station. As we crossed the gap between vessels, another explosion rocked the Solon ship. A piece of debris struck Commander Voss, sending her spinning away from our group without thinking. I fired my thrusters at maximum, intercepting her trajectory and locking my arms around her midsection. The impact sent us both tumbling, but I managed to stabilize us with a counterburst. "Are you injured?" I asked, heart pounding. "Suit integrity at 70%, she replied, her voice uncharacteristically strained. "Proceed to the airlock." We made it back as the Solon vessel's remaining systems failed catastrophically. From the safety of Docking Bay Epsilon, we watched it break apart, scattering into the void. Medical teams took charge of the Solons while a technician helped. Commander Voss removed her damaged suit. I noticed her wince as they lifted the helmet, a gesture so subtle most humans would have missed it. Hours later, after the emergency crews departed and the reports were filed, we found ourselves alone again in the docking bay. Commander Voss sat at her console, her posture perfect despite the bruising visible along her left temple. "You should visit medical," I suggested. "Unnecessary," she replied. But the usual sharpness was absent from her voice. I approached her console, leaning against it casually. "You know, most supervisors would give their staff the rest of the night off after saving 3 lives and nearly dying." She looked up at me, her violet eyes studying my face with unexpected intensity. "Would you prefer to be dismissed, Specialist Hayes?" "Actually, no," I admitted. "I'd like to know why you never leave this docking bay." Her markings darkened suddenly, pulsing with a deep indigo that I'd never seen before. "That is not relevant to your duties." "Maybe not," I agreed. "But it's relevant to my curiosity, which is currently at an all-time high." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, very quietly, "I lost someone here, in this docking bay." "No," her fingers traced an absent pattern on the console. "In the Outer Rim conflict, my bondmate Krell, he commanded a diplomatic vessel. Understanding dawned slowly, and you monitor the arrivals, hoping... No," she interrupted sharply. "Am not delusional, Specialist Hayes. Krell is gone. His vessel was destroyed with all hands. I received confirmation 3 years, 2 months, and 14 days ago." "Then why?" "Because sleep brings dreams," she said simply. "And in dreams he returns. Each time, I must lose him again upon waking." She turned back to her console. "It is more efficient to simply remain awake." The admission hung between us, unexpected and raw. I didn't know how to respond, so I did the only thing I could think. Avia pulled up a chair beside her and began processing the next batch of manifests in silence. After several minutes, she spoke again. "Your flight trajectory today was reckless. Where did Dick... worked, didn't it? You endangered yourself unnecessarily?" "I saved your life," I pointed out. Her markings pulsed once, bright gold. "Yes," she acknowledged. "You did. We worked side by side through the remainder of the shift. Neither of us mentioned leaving." A persistent alarm dragged me from sleep, its mechanical wails slicing through my dreams. I fumbled for my comm unit, nearly knocking it from my bedside table. "Hayes," I mumbled, still half asleep. "Report to Docking Bay Epsilon immediately." Commander Voss's dual-toned voice snapped me fully awake. "Emergency Protocol 7. The connection terminated before I could respond. I checked the time, 14:30 hours, the middle of my designated sleep period. Whatever warranted Protocol 7. Must be serious. I dressed in record time and sprinted through the station's corridors, dodging bewildered day shift personnel. When I reached Docking Bay Epsilon, I found it transformed. The usually quiet space now hummed with activity security officers establishing perimeters, medical personnel standing by with trauma kits, and at the center of it all, Commander Voss, issuing orders with calm precision. "Specialist Hayes reporting," I announced, slightly breathless. Commander Voss turned to me, her markings pulsing with an urgency I'd never witnessed before. "The Solons we rescued have provided intelligence. The attack on their vessel was orchestrated by Vex mercenaries." My blood ran cold. The Vex were notorious throughout the galaxy, genetically engineered soldiers from a failed military program, who had turned to piracy and terrorism after their creators abandoned them. "Why target a Solon trading vessel?" I asked. "Not the vessel," Commander Voss clarified. "It's cargo. Quantum-encrypted data crystals containing diplomatic communications." She handed me a tablet. "The surviving Solons believe the mercenaries planted a tracking device before the attack. They're coming here." I scanned the information on the tablet, translating the Solon script. "These communications reference the Outer Rim Peace Accords." "Yes." Something flickered across her face, a shadow of emotion quickly suppressed. "The same accords that were being negotiated when Krell's vessel was destroyed." Before I could process the implications, the station's proximity sensors blared. A small unmarked transport had dropped out of FTL travel dangerously close to our position. "They're attempting to dock at Maintenance Bay Theta," reported a security officer, "bypassing authorization protocols." "Lock down all systems," Commander Voss ordered. "Specialist Hayes, you're with me?" We moved swiftly through service corridors, bypassing the main thoroughfares. Commander Voss accessed a weapons locker en route, arming herself with a neural disruptor and offering me a similar device. "I've never used one," I admitted, taking it gingerly. "Point and discharge," she instructed. "The effect is temporary, but unpleasant." Maintenance Bay Theta was deserted when we arrived. The day shift evacuated as soon as the alarm sounded. Positioned ourselves behind cargo containers, watching as the external airlocks cycled. "When they enter, we wait for security too," I began, but Commander Voss silenced me with a gesture. "Security was diverted to protect the Solon refugees," she whispered. "Standard procedure." "So it's just us?" Her violet eyes met mine. "Just us." The airlock completed its cycle. 3 figures entered, humanoid in basic shape, but with distinct Vex modifications. Reinforced exoskeletons covered their limbs, and their features were obscured by tactical masks with glowing sensor arrays. They moved with military precision. Scanning the bay methodically, the leader signaled toward the main corridor directly. Toward the secured room where the Solon data crystals were stored. Commander Voss tensed beside me, her markings dimming to near invisibility, an Astrali camouflage response. She signaled for me to circle left while she took the right flank. I crept around the cargo containers, trying to control my breathing. The neural disruptor felt impossibly heavy in my hand. I'd barely completed basic security training, certainly nothing that prepared me for armed Vex mercenaries. One of the Vex paused, his sensor array sweeping in my direction. I froze, pressing myself against a container. For a terrifying moment, the sensor lingered on my position. Then, a crash from the opposite side of the bay drew their attention. Commander Voss had deliberately knocked over a tool cart, exposing herself to draw them away from me. The Vex immediately opened fire, energy pulses sizzling through the air where she had stood a moment before. I seized the opportunity. Emerging from cover and discharging my neural disruptor at the nearest mercenary, the energy wave struck him squarely, and he collapsed in a twitching heap. The remaining Vex spun toward me, weapons raised. I ducked back behind the container as energy blasts scorched the metal above my head. Heart pounding. I tried to remember my evasive training. A series of rapid disruptor pulses echoed through the bay, followed by a grunt of pain. I risked a glance around the container to see Commander Voss engaged in close combat with the Vex leader. Her movements were a blur, far faster than any human could match, but the Vex's augmented reflexes kept pace. The third mercenary circled behind her, weapon aimed at her back. Without thinking, I launched myself forward, tackling him. Around the midsection, we crashed to the floor, his weapon skittering away. He recovered quickly, mechanical joints worry as he flipped me onto my back. Armored hands closing around my throat. Black spots danced at the edges of my vision as I struggled against his grip. Through dimming consciousness, I saw Commander Voss dispatch the leader with a precise strike to his neural implants. She turned, assessing the situation in a split second, and hurled her disruptor with impossible accuracy. It struck my attacker's temple with enough force to crack his tactical mask. His grip loosened, and I rolled away. Gasping for air, Commander Voss was beside me instantly, her cool fingers examining the bruising on my neck. "Can you breathe?" I nodded, unable to speak yet. The bay doors burst open as station security finally arrived, weapons drawn. Commander Voss stood, her posture returning to its perfect rigidity as she briefed the security chief. I remained on the floor, watching her transformation from warrior back to administrator with fascination. Hours later, after medical checks and debriefings, we returned to the quiet of Docking Bay Epsilon. The Vex mercenaries had been secured. In the station's brig, and the Solon data crystals remained safe. Commander Voss sat at her console, reviewing security footage of the incident. I approached slowly, still feeling the ghost of the Vex's hands around my throat. "You saved my life," I said hoarsely. Again, she didn't look up. "You intervened first." "Yeah, well, it wasn't my smartest move." Pause, then it was brave. I leaned against her console, studying her profile. In the dim light, her markings glowed with a soft intensity I'd never seen before. "Your combat training is impressive," I observed, "not standard for diplomatic corps." "Krell insisted we train together," she replied, her voice softer than usual. "He believed diplomats should be prepared for all contingencies." "Sounds wise." He was. For the first time, she spoke of him without her markings darkening to indigo. Instead, they pulsed with a gentle amber. "Today would have been our bonding anniversary." I hesitated, then placed my hand near hers, on the console not touching. "But close, tell me about him." She looked at my hand, then at me, surprise evident in her violet eyes. After a moment, she began to speak. Her dual-toned voice, weaving the story of how she met Krell at the Australia Academy. Their years serving together in the diplomatic corps, their plans for the future. As she spoke, her hand moved incrementally, closer to mine until our fingers were almost touching. Neither of us acknowledged it, but neither pulled away. "You would have liked him," she concluded. "He had an appreciation for what he called the beautiful inefficiency of other species." "Hi." "Praise from an Australi?" I smiled. "The highest," she agreed, and for the first time since I'd known her. The corner of her mouth curved upward in what might have been a smile. We sat in comfortable silence after that, our fingers nearly touching on the console, the space between us charged with something neither of us was ready to name. "What exactly am I looking at?" I asked, studying the complex waveform that pulsed across Commander Voss's display. It was our 5th consecutive night of extended shifts, processing the backlog created by the Vex incursion. Station security had increased patrols, and rumors circulated about additional mercenary cells operating in nearby sectors. Despite the heightened alert status, Docking Bay Epsilon remained our isolated domain during the night cycle. "An anomalous transmission, Commander," Voss replied, her fingers manipulating the display to enhance certain frequency patterns. It appeared briefly in the subspace band reserved for diplomatic communications. I leaned closer, something about the rhythm tugging at my memory. It's structured almost like language, but not any I recognize. It is not language, she said quietly. It is music. She touched a control, and suddenly the visual waveform translated a sound, a haunting melody that seemed to echo from somewhere ancient and vast. The notes resonated with a peculiar harmonic quality that made my skin prickle. Astrali music? I guessed Commander Voss's markings pulsed with a deep, turbulent blue, composition by Krell. He created it during our bonding ceremony. I watched her face carefully. You think it's a coincidence? After the Vex attack and the Solon data crystals? There are no coincidences of this nature in subspace communications. Her voice remained measured, but her markings betrayed her agitation. This signal was deliberately transmitted on a frequency that only certain diplomatic vessels monitor. Could it be some kind of automated system? Maybe an old beacon that was triggered by recent events. She shook her head. The composition has been altered. There are additional harmonic sequences that were not part of the original. My heart raced as I processed the implications. You think Krell is alive? No. The word was sharp, definitive. Received confirmation of his death. I viewed the recovered fragments of his vessel. I performed the astrali rites of passage. What? Someone is using his composition as a message, she interrupted. Someone who knew him well enough to modify it in a way that I would recognize. She manipulated the console again, isolating specific harmonic patterns within the music. As she worked, I noticed her hands trembling slightly, the first sign of physical uncertainty I'd ever witnessed in her. These additional sequences correspond to navigational coordinates, she explained. A location in the Kythera Nebula. That's in the demilitarized zone, established by the Outer Rim Peace Accords. I noted. Controlled access only. Commander Voss's violet eyes met mine. The transmission originated from within the nebula. A heavy silence fell between us. The implications were enormous unauthorized presence in the demilitarized zone, potentially. Connected to the Vex mercenaries and the Solon data crystals, all somehow linked to Krell's final mission. We should report this to Station Command, I suggested. No. Her response was immediate. Not yet. The transmission was encrypted using a personal cipher Krell and I developed. No one else would recognize its significance. You're thinking of investigating personally, I realized. It wasn't a question. Her markings pulsed once, confirming my suspicion. That's against at least 7 station protocols, I pointed out. Not to mention potentially dangerous if the Vex are involved. I am aware of the regulations. Her tone cooled noticeably. I do not require your assistance or approval. Specialist Hayes. The formal address stung after weeks of gradual warmth. Between us, I straightened, pulling back from the console. Fine, I said, unable to keep the hurt from my voice. It's your career and your life to risk. I'll just go back to processing manifests like a good little subordinate. I turned away, moving back to my own workstation. Behind me, I heard her. Chair swivel. It's Tessa, she said softly the first time she had ever used my first name. I paused, but didn't turn around. I have lived with uncertainty for 3 years, she continued. Every day wondering if the confirmation was wrong. Every night avoiding sleep to escape the dreams where he returns. I cannot ignore this signal. I turned back to face her. I understand that. What I don't understand is why you're shutting me out. Her markings cycled through several patterns, rapidly confusion, conflict, something deeper I couldn't interpret. I am unaccustomed to involving others in personal matters. Well, get accustomed, I replied, crossing my arms. Because if you're going to the Kythera Nebula, I'm coming with you. Her eyes widened slightly. That would be extremely inadvisable. Probably, I agreed. But you need someone who can help with translations and communications if this goes sideways. Plus, I'm the only one besides you who knows about the signal. She studied me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Finally, her markings settled into a steady amber glow. There is a maintenance shuttle scheduled for routine sensor alignment in the nebula tomorrow, she said. The manifest indicates a 2-person crew. I smiled. What a coincidence. The next 12 hours passed in tense preparation. Commander Voss used her authority to modify the shuttle's scheduled route. While I researched the nebula's unusual properties and downloaded relevant language databases for potential encounters, we departed during shift change, the period of maximum station activity when our absence would be least noticeable. The shuttle was small, but efficient, designed for extended maintenance operations in remote locations. As we cleared the station's traffic control zone, Commander Voss engaged the propulsion system. The stars blurred around us as we accelerated. Toward the nebula, its swirling gases visible as a distant, luminous cloud. "For hours to destination," she announced, setting the autopilot. We sat side by side in the cockpit, the close quarters creating an intimacy we'd never experienced in the vastness of Docking Bay Epsilon. Her shoulder occasionally brushed against mine as she adjusted controls, each contact sending an unexpected warmth through me. "You never told me how you ended up at Meridian," she said after a period of silence. "Your qualifications in xenolinguistics could have secured you a position at any diplomatic outpost."
What?
"I was supposed to join the Terran Diplomatic Corps, had the position lined up, completed all the training. Then I discovered my supervisor was falsifying translation records to serve corporate interests. You reported this misconduct, of course, and promptly found myself blacklisted from every diplomatic position in Terran space." I shrugged. Meridian was the only place that would take me, and even then, I had to stretch the truth about my qualifications. Her markings pulsed with a gentle gold light. Integrity at personal cost. Krell would have approved. Something in her tone made me glance sideways at her. "You talk about him differently now?" Since the signal appeared, she was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing an absent pattern on the control panel. "Hope is ... disruptive. Even the possibility that he might have survived, or that someone connected to him might still exist. ... double quotes." She trailed off, then added softly, "It changes things." "Things?" I asked, my voice equally soft. Instead of answering, she reached out and placed her hand over mine. Her skin was cooler than human temperature, smooth with a subtle texture like fine silk. Her markings pulsed with a deep rose color I'd never seen before. "Bonding is not merely emotional or physical," she said, her dual-toned voice vibrating. "With intensity, it creates a resonance between two beings, a harmonic pattern that continues even after death." I turned my hand beneath hers until our palms met. "And you've been avoiding forming new connections?" "Yes." Her fingers interlaced. "With mine, until recently?" My heart raced as understanding dawned. The late shifts, the gradual softening of her demeanor, the way she'd begun sharing parts of herself with me. They weren't merely the actions of a grieving widow seeking distraction. "Nyala," I whispered her first name, testing it on my tongue. She leaned closer, her violet eyes studying my face with extraordinary focus. "The resonance I feel with you. It should not be possible. Not so soon after Krell. Not with a human." "Maybe that's why you need to know the truth," I suggested. "About what happened to him. About what this signal means." "Yes," she agreed, "but I fear what we might discover." Her face was now inches from mine, her markings pulsing with that same rose hue. I found myself captivated by the rhythm, my own pulse seeming to synchronize with it. "Whatever we find," I promised, "you won't face it alone." She closed the remaining distance between us, pressing her forehead against mine in what I recognized as an Australi gesture of profound intimacy. Her markings touched my skin, sending a tingling warmth across my brow. "Thank you," she whispered. We remained like that, connected and silent, as the shuttle carried us toward the nebula and whatever secrets it held.